If there was a way to turn your lawn into edible food forest, would you be interested? Because it seems to be one of the key solutions on the planet right now. Hey, everybody, welcome to Voluntary Living with me, David James Rodriguez, where we are building a world based on consent, self ownership, and freedom. And a very exciting guest today because we're talking about solutions. And this is a gentleman who is actually installing and creating edible food forests with an amazing organization of his own and a partner. So before we hear all the cool stuff that he is doing, I want to welcome Cameron James to the show, brother. How are you?
Brother David, thanks for having me, man. I'm excited to be here, and I'm a big fan of your work, and I feel like I'm just getting introduced to it. So thanks for having me and the opportunity to share.
Yeah, man, it was so good to meet you in real life at Galt's Landing last year at the first Path of Freedom event with Jim Gale and the champions down there. And I was really impressed with your story because when I see some of the videos you make on your Instagram and I think some YouTube videos, you seem like a pro, and I can tell that you put a lot of work in. And so for someone like me who this is my second year working on a garden, and many of the audience members, we want food independence and we just don't know how. We're not sure to go about it. So your story is very impressive and admirable, and I think people should know about it because it seems like you've been doing it for many years. But my understanding is you haven't been doing it for many years. You just kind of went both feet in and learned and doing business with it now, helping people out there in Florida. So feel free to start anywhere that you want, but these are some of the questions and topics that I'm interested in. I think the people are too. Of how did you start? First of all, what is Food Forest Everywhere? You're the founder of, you're the cooperative partner with Jim Gales and Food Forest Abundance, and probably some other cool things that you're up to. And feel free to share what those things are, how you got involved, and we'll just kind of go down the path and have an amazing conversation wherever it goes.
Cool. Yeah, I'll definitely say, man, I'm excited for some things that we'll get through. I'm excited for this conversation. Thank you for setting this up. I
Yeah.
can already tell myself getting excited about some of the things that it is true that I didn't have any background. I literally just jumped in. Uh, all in is something I've been messaging. Oh, are you hearing me okay, David?
A little bit. Yeah, you froze for a second, but let's see if it continues. I think it's okay right now, but
Hey, you know what? You know what? Even the food forests freeze in the winter and they stop growing for a minute. So if technology does that for just that's okay. Spring
okay.
will come and we will launch
Yeah.
back off. So
Yeah.
um a little over 2 years ago, I made a decision to just scrap everything away in my life. And I was like, okay, what actually matters? What's important? And to jump to the conclusion of that, it was I'm going to grow food for my family. It was the decision that I made. And I just immersed myself into food forestry, into permaculture. And that led me through a series of events and a series of connections that connected me with Jim Gale down at Galt's Landing, who was the founder of Galt's Landing, but also of Food. So I always explain Food Forest Abundance is a global cooperative that is inspiring people to grow food instead of lawns. That's the simplicity of the whole thing, right? So the
Yeah.
cooperative is made up of many different people and many different components and partners. But I'd say the premise of it, the service of it, the product of it is offering people an intentional design for their property, right? So you can call it permaculture. Some people will refer to it as regenerative agriculture. It is absolutely a food forest, right? So we're mocking these systems. But I share this to say from that point, when I walked on the Galt's Landing, there was two things that hit me instantly. Day one, Jim called me out and I'm walking around, and number one was this is the way to grow food.
Yeah.
It's permaculture. It's
Yes.
food forest. Like this is the way. It's the most. It's the highest productive, the highest yield compared to the amount of inputs. Right.
Yeah.
Like absolutely. When you talk about the truly passive systems that you can create, and that does not mean that there's no effort. You're not going to set the wrong intention. But if you can see the forest, I always point when I'm with people to a forest around me, and I say, if you look at these systems, there's no human input, no human contact, and the truth is they're probably thriving because there isn't.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
we can just help nature in a way, give it what it already does, and then give it a little bit of love and care in the same way that we would with a child. After a couple of years, that child can take care of itself, but it doesn't mean you're just going to put it off and never interact with it. Now you develop a different relationship as it gets older. And that's exactly what we're doing with these systems. And so I'm standing in the middle of a food forest that I started a little over a year ago, but it was mostly planted a year ago. And obviously, just sitting here having a conversation cannot articulate the amount of growth. But what I can say is in the last 4 months, just through work and just through other things going on, I haven't done anything out here. And when I mean nothing, I mean nothing, right? And that doesn't mean you don't ever want to get out there and do stuff. I have just been in another space. In those 4 months, my mangoes are now blooming. My bananas have shot out another rack of bananas. I have avocados that are blooming off to my left. I have peaches that are blooming off to my right. I have cassava that I'm about to harvest here that's been in the ground for 9 months. So the reason I say that is by setting up a system a little over a year ago and letting it do its work, letting nature do what it does, I now have food that's being available to me this time of year and in the next coming months. So traditional agriculture doesn't set that up, right? It's heavy inputs, it's a lot of labor, it's a lot of chemicals that are designed to destroy. So I know I kind of jumped through my story into a little bit of what we're doing here, but feel free to chime back in, David, and direct this any way we think we should go.
Well, yeah. Well, this is the dream. I gotta say, like I said, I'm doing a garden this year, and I've had predators, and I learned a little bit about caterpillars and ladybugs, and so I think each person out there, wherever region or climate you're in, you got to learn some of these things. And there's I would say a base knowledge. And when I'm doing this, I got other things I'm doing, but it seems like you said, you went all in, and that's maybe start there because I'm realizing it's a huge learning process, and maybe that's a mental block that I have, and I'm looking at this mountain, and it's not really a mountain, it's just kind of a small hill, but because I'm so close, it's like, oh, this is going to be impossible. I've been to Galt's Landing a couple times, and I got video footage of it. I have a new channel called Food Independence Academy. So just to learn
Cool.
about these things, yeah, we're just like, here's where it was in 2022, and we were just there in
Mhm.
2023, and it's like doubled, and you see like the what is it, the peanut or the longevity spin, or the things are
Yep.
taking over the seashell path, and you're like, wow, this
Yep.
this food is getting out of control around here. And
Yep.
it's like, that's the problem we want. We want so much food that it's just like, just give it away. Let's can it. Let's do these things, because what these predator psychopaths seem to be doing is create a scarcity mindset where there's
Mhm.
not enough, and you got to turn neighbors against each other. And I kind of feel
Mhm.
this in my gut and some of the research that I've done. And it's like, okay, Jim Gale's got a solution. Cameron James has a solution, and some other guys I respect who I've met, Joel
Absolutely.
Salatin and Paul Wheaton, and that famous quote I think is from Bill Mollison that Jim, as far as I know, made famous to me, which was, the problems we face in society are super complex, but the solutions are embarrassingly simple. So maybe you could
Hmm.
talk the simplicity of it, and the mindset of starting. Maybe I think all in's the best way to go, but like maybe like
Yeah.
some hobbyist like me, it's like, okay, I want to do it, but I can't like throw everything away at this point. It feels, but maybe we can start there with that basic simple mindset.
Yeah, for sure. There's two things that stuck out to me. One is it all begins in design, right? Like this is all design, right? Like we're going in here and we're using knowledge that we have. So for anybody that's starting off, if somebody doesn't immerse themselves and take a permaculture course and go through all this learning and go through these trainings and this education, right? Then it's design. Then you need somebody, just like anything in life. If you need help with something, go to somebody who has the experience of it, right? So that's the foundation, like I said, of Food Forest Abundance. Is it's a cooperative of designers that understand how to at least what we as a human species currently understand, right? Like we've advanced enough or evolved enough to have enough experience to say, if you put these types of systems together with these elements, the sun patterns, the wind patterns, the water, this type of species, that it creates this type of production, right? So we have designers that understand these different regions and what plants to put together and how to craft them, how to contour the land, the inputs that it's needed, right? So it's all about design for anybody that's starting off. Or, like I said, the other path is like myself, but again, I immerse myself. Like I was in a position, I always say we can binge learn things. Like I can put 50 hours of education into my mind in a couple of days. You know what I mean? Is it like super detailed? Do I have the experience? No. But is it a big launching pad to kind of get us into it? So that's a I think those are the two paths for everybody. Is you're either going to jump in and you're going to learn it yourself, or you're going to get some help and you're going to get design, and then you're going to have it. And then the learning begins because
Right.
now you have this thing in your land. Now you, even if you want to plant it yourself and quote unquote install it yourself,
Right.
now you have a blueprint. Now I know, cool. When you get a blueprint, you have where everything is laid out, what goes around it, tall trees, medium trees, shrubs, everything, right? You get an entire plant list that tells you these plants. And what are these plants? These plants are edible and native, right? So we're mixing native environments with edible plants, and we're growing food and we're growing medicine, right? We're creating very passive systems and using nature to our advantage. So design, everything is in design. It has to be intentional, right? We know what we put into our lives is what we're going to get out of it.
Hmm. Yeah.
And you
So
said something else really good. It is coming back to me now. Was um, growing food is a solution to all of the
yeah.
world's greatest problems.
Right.
It really is. And if somebody could try to dissect that, they could peel back layers of that statement, but they would never be able to prove that growing food is not a contributing factor to solving all the problems in the world. It may not be the only solution. I'll give them that. But I guarantee you that growing your own food, it localizes our food and water supply chains. It takes the chemicals and the poisons that are designed to kill out. It creates it gives people a sense of purpose, a sense of contribution, right? When you go into the land and you're working with people, you have this connection with the other people you're working with. When you leave that day, you can see the effects of your work. You didn't sit on a computer screen that didn't move. I can
Hmm.
see so many things that go on here on this computer screen all day, but my body didn't move. When you're connected to the elements and you're in the land, how healthy is that? Now we start reversing cancer and diabetes because people are not living on this chemical based food that, like, we're shitting in our own gut because we're not eating anything that's real, right?
Hmm.
Like we need to be a part of nature that has a as a decomposition system. It removes our dependency on petroleum based fuels because now
Hmm.
my food doesn't have to come from 2 and 3,000 miles away because it needed to be picked early, right?
Right.
Like we're picking food early before it's vine ripened, which we know through science that the most nutritional value is put into a piece of fruit towards the end of its ripening, right? So we're picking it early and then we're sending it across the country and then we're sending it to another country,
Hmm.
right? On a boat and on a ship. And then it sits in the grocery store and then
Yeah.
it's sprayed with chemicals. So we're lacking the nutrients that we need. We have a unsustainable system in burning fuel. I don't care if the fuel is because we can walk out of our properties and access these resources locally. And I'll say right now, if you for food, it's the
Right.
same. The concepts are the same, that we're working in harmony with nature. And in some regions, that's livestock, that's animal agriculture is, I guess, a term that we could use. So growing food contributes, and I'm sure there's things that I'm forgetting right now.
Yeah. No,
It
that
just
was
solves
good.
these problems.
Yeah, you cut out for like 2 seconds. It was you said the principles of what and what were similar again.
The principles of permaculture don't change because permaculture is not food forest. Permaculture is not, it's not even about growing food. It's a lifestyle. It's about people care, earth care, and fair share, right? So can you imagine just for a moment here how different society would look if everybody just took what they needed and left what they didn't?
Hmm.
We arguably none of us could even fathom it. We can go to our imagination and try to kind of look like that, right? So on a large scale, it's probably not realistic. But can we get together with our local communities and start to behave in such a manner? Maybe in small groups of 10 to 15,
Yes.
maybe a small community that has 80 to 100 people and start living like tribal indigenous ways?
Yes.
Absolutely. Right. Because we can have access to all of our needs, which is food, shelter, water, energy, and community or people, right? Some commonality, right? If we have people around us, we can relate. If I just with animals, it'd be weird. We need people around us. And our society is not structured that way, right? So we can have access to these elements in our local environment. And that doesn't have to mean your own property, right? But if there's a community garden or there's a friend nearby or there's a piece of a farm nearby that we can bring up, right, and put inputs into and create a system that can feed the community, we can start making these effects today.
Hmm. Right.
So
So now, when you said when you went all in, was is there any like course or books or documentaries or something that like was a key factor of it? Or I mean, made a great point. Like you can put like so many hours in just a short amount of time, whether it's audio or written. But was there any like key? I don't want to say like what's the emerald tablet or something, like some key uh what is it, the Loretta Stone or something like that, where it's like this is a key thing and we can go all about the different ways about that. Or like where would you say someone could begin? Like I think, Cameron, I think a lot of more people are going to be going all in.
Yeah.
That maybe I'm just a little bit optimistic, but I just came
Yeah.
back from Morelia, Mexico with the Greater Reset, and people are looking for
Mm.
solutions, but and just like me, we're feeling the programming and the limiting beliefs that we have been entrained through government, school, and media and all these things. It's like, can I do it? Where do I begin? And it seems like there's 1,000 things to begin, but
Yeah.
Jack Spurko said this 2 years ago, would help me. He said, if you want to start, go in your backyard, look for the first place of soil and plant something. So I was
Yeah.
like, okay, so maybe that's first base. I got the first base, and now second base is like maybe I gotta like learn guilds or something, or get familiar with my native plants or something. I guess we're making it up as we go along, as
Yeah.
a true education is. But what would you say is the next step where it's like, okay, I've planted some things, I got a few fruit trees, some tomatoes I did, but it's like, okay, now maybe I got, like I said, got to start building and start kind of be a cooperative partner with you guys, or whatever the next step is for someone else out there that might be like me.
Yeah, I think design, again, it goes back to design. If somebody can get a design, now
Okay.
when they go into the land, they know what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
Even if you just
Okay.
start with a portion of it, now you know what to do. And we also offer like a consulting service where you can just talk to somebody and say, hey, there's just some things I'm looking to do. You can just talk to somebody who understands this stuff too. So for
Okay.
anybody that wants to check that out, you can go to foodforestabundance.com. And I think there's actually free strategy sessions right now. So you actually talk to somebody for, I think, like 20 to 25 minutes about a lot of this stuff. So for anybody that's genuinely interested, just go there and talk to somebody. Like that's why we wanted to make it available, is to have these conversations, just like in the way that somebody can listen to this and start to learn what's possible, right? But it's
Yeah.
never going to take effect until we actually get into the land. This is not something that you can intellectually and logically study and look at and create
Right.
productivity. You got to get in
Great
the land,
point.
right? So if we can have something that can put a stepping stone in front of us, which would be design, then people can do that, right? So to answer your question that you said, I really am going, even though my path was a little bit unique, it really wasn't, is community. So I'll jump ahead and say, like, at the end of the day, if we can band a group of people together and put their resources together, and that can literally be money, it can be time, it can be skills, it can be tools, it can be the land, right? So if we can come together, we can create this space, right? Like, what if there's, 3 or 4 people that live in a suburban neighborhood and they just are friends because they're neighbors, and one of them just decides, like, hey, let's build it in my backyard. I got the biggest backyard, y'all can cover whenever you want. Like that's real, to think that people could do that, right? So I have to say, like, banding together with people, hands down. But I think what you are alluding to is a little bit more specific with my story. And I do think that studying permaculture specifically is the way,
Yeah.
because like, and I know you're big on this too, and your messaging is like, the way you call it a paradigm or a way of thinking, right? Is at the end of the day, we do have to have a different lens to look
Yeah.
through in our lives for this really to take effect.
Yeah.
Because the real core of this, dude, is not to grow food. It's
Right.
actually to support and sustain life, right? And if we can create a habitat, a natural habitat, a natural ecosystem, which is just an ecological system, right? Which is just nature, and the system's already doing it, right? So if we can build these systems that support life, we can be rewarded for that. And how are we rewarded for that? By intentionally sowing the seeds that we would like to reap, right? So I say all to studying permaculture, you're going to start a little more resourceful. I'm going to hold the stop before I get into permaculture, but are
All
you
right.
hearing me okay and whatnot? Am
Yeah,
I
that's
coming through
okay.
good?
Yeah, you're all right. Mm-hmm.
Cool. So when you start to really get into permaculture, you start to look at life differently, because if we start doing things more sustainably, maybe I'd be more willing to use more of the stuff that I have that's a little bit more used instead of just going and buying something new, right? Maybe I stopped buying so many things and bringing to my house all this plastic, and now I have this waste. Now, instead of my food scraps, throwing them in the trash and creating a methane gas in the landfills and whatever, now I start putting those into a bag and I start creating compost and I start gardening with it. Or maybe I take it to a neighbor gardener that's down the street or a community farm that's nearby, right? So we start looking at the world a little different. Now with I use cardboard boxes. I say cardboard and paper because paper came from wood, and that all can go back into the system. We can use that for what's called mulching, which is preserving the ground, building soil and things of that nature. So we start looking differently, and we start thinking like, how much do I actually need?
Oh, the audio went out there for a second. Can you hear me?
People around me. So
You got me? Do you hear
they
me real fast? Just
I
the
can
last
hear
10
you. Yeah.
seconds. The last 10 seconds was something about me. I got being resourceful in cardboard and paper, and then the last like 10 seconds I just missed out.
I think it's just the lens of being resourceful, just being more efficient, right? With all of our resources. And that shows up with our time, with our mental space, with our family, with our money, with our food. I think
Yeah.
it's just about like, what do I need? Right. And I will say I think logically about this, but I'm feeling it intuitively, is I feel so abundantly provided for. And my land is not like, I don't have a ton of food here right now. Like it's not like where I could just totally live off of it, but
Right.
there's this sense, right, of working with the land and in the land in stewardship. Starting to get some bugs flying around me. They're here and they're getting excited. Um, so you start to live under this nature of like, I feel provided for, right? Like,
Yeah.
and it sounds funny, but you feel like held by Mother Earth. Like, I got you. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like now that you have the skills and the wherewithal and the perception to see resources, to see
Yeah.
efficiency, to know that you have skills to provide for people, I think is just a peace of mind that cannot be bought. It can only be experienced.
Yeah. That's awesome because yeah, the phrase I heard you say food, shelter, water, community, and I think there was something else. What was missing there?
Energy,
Energy. Okay,
energy.
yeah. Because
Yeah,
that's the recently with the exit and build strategy of Derek Bros and John Bush, which was
yeah,
exit the systems and build, and that's the schools, the grocery stores, the health clinics, which is a big goal and dream, but it's a real solution, right? Like we're not asking
yeah,
permission anymore. We're not trying to get licenses or permits in general. I guess people are free to do that if they want to, but just independent food, water, and energy, and then the community aspect of it and the shelter. And if you have those things, no matter what these dudes do, you're free. And you said that with the community, like you get, let's say, 10 people together, and they can work out an agreement, whether it's in their backyard or someone else's backyard. They can work out some way to work with each other. And I think just having that clarity of, we want independent food, water, energy, shelter, and community, is a great thing to speak into existence, because we're learning new skills here, And are you there? It kind of froze up for a second. Oh, you got booted. All right, let's see if we can get him on here again.
can you hear me, dude? I'm gonna
All
make the
right,
move.
there we go. We got you
For
back
anybody
in
watching
action.
this, we'll show you how authentic it is.
Well, yeah, just for
There
the
it is.
for the viewers' entertainment, we knew we were rolling the dice a little bit to have the background there, but
Yeah,
yeah, this is what it is. I'm glad you said being resourceful, because I did hear that from one of my teachers, actually a couple of my teachers in the past 5, 7 years. People think they need resources, and they probably do, but if you become resourceful, which is to see the things around you,
mm,
as you said, the cardboard, the paper, and neighbors, and I just love that you said that permaculture and this type of work is about supporting life.
yeah,
That's really what it is. We're seeing life being damaged by mega corporations and governments, and it's like, well, isn't life important? Like, isn't this
hmm
a known thing? Whether you read the Declaration of Independence or you believe in self-evident truth that your life matters and that the animals matter and the plants matter, and like we're learning about the water having memory, and just amazing discoveries are being made right now. It's just like, what a beautiful time to be alive. And at the same time, it's like there's some terrorists out there, wrapped up in government agencies. Like, I love Jim Gale just said, I am the EPA. It's like, oh, beautiful. So this is what we're doing. We're stepping into the new way of being. And everybody doesn't have to be like Jim Gale. Everybody, you be you, I be me, let's be free. But the supporting life component, I think, was really essential. And one of the things I want to share with the audience also that Jim taught me, and maybe you agree with, is that food forest abundance or independent food growing there is a safety measure in and of itself. Because if I'm the only guy with food in the neighborhood and stuff hits the fan, they're gonna come get my food and stuff. But if all my neighbors, everybody has abundance of food and growing, now it's like we're just at peace and we're just at harmony, and we can just live and enjoy and make families and take care of the elderly people, and like
Right.
do the things that we're supposed to do. So it's a new paradigm, really, and learning some of these new skills, I think, is very exciting as well. You mentioned feeling provided for or taken care of. Some of the things that I've grown last couple of years, like some eggplants, there's some strawberries, there's some tomatoes, some of these smaller things, but like going out there and checking on my plant, and initially I didn't have the automatic watering system, and now I got a little automatic watering system. And so now I'm like, oh, this is exciting. And I go out there and it's kind of like, it's like you said, a child. It's kind of like you having a
Yeah.
relationship with nature. I kind of feel the creator mindset or spirit, like, oh, that's why God said, man, you take care of the earth and eat the herbs and do all these things. It's like this different world versus when I go to the grocery store, which God bless us all who are dependent on the grocery store still. But like it's different than going and buying it versus like you go out and you pick it, and people at Galt's Landing have done that. They have Airbnbs out there too. So maybe you could talk about the business opportunity, because you should sent me a great design, and I'm like, man, I wish I understood this design. It's like, just understand it's a big design. You've told me some of the things you've been working on,
Yep.
and I'm like, this is freaking awesome, dude. Like,
Yeah.
you're newish, but like 2 years, like you've done a lot, I think, in a couple years to do these big projects. Want to share how big that project was, or some of the things that people can look forward to as a potential career. I think this is
Absolutely.
career opportunity for young people and middle-aged people, maybe elderly people, to create real freedom and real
Yep.
solutions to serious problems that we're seeing. So yeah, feel free to take that wherever you like there.
Yeah, dude, so many good things you just said, so many good thoughts. One thing to feed off of is outside of spiritual things, like in this experience that we're having,
Yes.
in that experience, the small farmer is the only free man.
Mm, yes.
Because if you don't have access to your own food, it doesn't even have to be society that collapses. It can just be a natural disaster.
Sure.
If something was to occur, we all know what we need to eat to live. And yeah, at least 99.99% of the people, there might be other people who can live in a different way for a certain amount of time. That's great. But let's keep it simple here, right?
Mm.
Physically speaking, the small farmer is the only free man in society. And it's not just because he has food or has access to food, but it's because he knows how to get access to it. He knows how to build, he knows how to grow, right? So when you talk about a career and a skill to have, what's one that's everlasting, that's timeless,
Yeah.
right? Like I say, these food forests, they can only go up in value. Like right now, we just sit on land and it artificially inflates in value based on a perceived value of the dollar, right? So we're waiting for it to go up based on what somebody else is dictating. So we're at the mercy of somebody else. And if that's how people want to live, that's fine. We just have to be in the know, right? But if I learn skills and I can build a system in the land that actually harnesses the resources that sustains me, my family, my community, then I genuinely have access to everything I need to what I just said to sustain life.
Right.
Right. So if we don't have access to those things, if we don't have those skills, have that know how, one, of course we feel the anxiety, because if somebody pulled the plug on us, we're dependent on the plug, right? But what if we had the skills to provide for ourselves? And again, it goes back to like a career and combining with community. Who's going to be the people that are going to be of the most value in the future? Well, it's the people that have the most relevant skills, right? We look in our world today, people are being compensated for skills that people think are valuable, right? But what is the one thing that's everlasting? We all need to eat. Yeah. Like you said, I'm grateful. Those people that bash the grocery stores, are you kidding me? I'm so grateful that they're there. They are the biggest bridge in society right now for us to be able to get over to this side, for us to localize our food supply system, because we're not there yet, right? And even when people start these systems, you're probably 2 to 3 years from like getting a high percentage of your diet and nutrition. As I got life buzzing around my face right now, they're buzzing right here. But like we're probably a couple years away before somebody can fully sustain their life from it, right? So even if somebody said, okay, I'm going to go make the money right now and generate the income, and then I'll buy the food forest later, you can make the money after you planted the food forest, but you can't speed those trees up.
That's right.
Right? You got 2 to 3 years of letting them grow. So if we don't get them in the food now, those who are reaping in the future are because they're sowing today, right? And we know that literally, actually, and figuratively, right? So now is absolutely the time to do it, right? And those people that do jump in and they learn these real life skills, they're of value to anybody. And I know when people get into business, like, well, who's your client? Well, it's everybody. Like, I get it. Like, your specific niche in business might not make sense, but who is your skill not valuable to?
Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? So you make yourself available to what actually matters to people. So I'm just like passionate that that's what it has to be. And even these people that we install food forests for, we will always do that. The backyard food forest will always do because it makes sense and people want them, right? But the people that are going to succeed with that are going to be the ones that jump in, right? They're going to be the ones that get in there and they learn. And when we walk out of there, that's not the end. That's the beginning, right? These trees are going to start blooming and growing. And they're going to start talking to you. And now you're being pulled out into the land. Why do we wake up and be like, I need to go outside, right? And I don't want to get into the whole farming thing. But like that used to be of value to society. And now there's things that occurred. And again, I don't like focusing on the shit because I don't even think we need to. People get it. Like if you get it, let's move towards it, right? Like you need access to your food. One thing I do want to say about farming that's pretty cool to help people understand where we're at is that industrial or mass farming is relatively new, right? Like we're only like a century into it. Let's just call it, generally speaking, more or less, right? So if we were doing what we were doing because we needed to provide food, like put yourself back in those shoes 100 years ago and say, okay, the population is growing at a crazy rate. We need to try to find a way to feed them. We need to produce more food. You guys got the food. Cool. More people. You guys take the food. You got the farmland. Can you produce for people? Shit, we're not able to produce enough food. Well, if we do some chemicals, maybe we can destroy this other stuff. So we'll produce more food and we can make, these synthetic fertilizers faster and we'll spray those. And like we're growing more food faster. So we're feeding people. Right? Even if what I just said is not true, can we actually see how the intent might have been good? Right? So the point is that we looking back on that, we go, we produced more food, but we destroyed our ecosystem. So let's evolve, right? So let's look at it. Okay, so this is what we were doing. This is what we now know because we can look at nature and we can see it. So we now have a new level of understanding and a new knowledge. We've evolved, right? And this is where all we're doing is we're in an era, in an age of just people call it getting back to rural land, to redeveloping, to reforesting, right? Yeah. Like that's where we're at. And we just have to do that. And we now know it. And it's just gonna be those who are the pioneers to help us do that. And there is some people that I've not met the person, but I met the people that interviewed them that have been studying permaculture their whole life. So they were 30 or 40 years old when they got into it. And I think they're in their 70s and 80s right now. And they're seeing the mass boom of permaculture right now. So like, think about the gratitude and the appreciation and almost the honor that they have for carrying that forward for decades when nobody was doing it, but knowing this is the right thing. Right. And again, that's just a title for what we're calling it. It just means permanent culture. And culture is just an experience of like human life, right? Like that's just what culture is. So like, why don't we support it? Right? And now we're supporting all of life. So it's an honor to continue carrying this forward for those who have presented it to us up until this point. So who wants to jump in and learn? Right? Now, like you said, there's a business opportunity. Everybody who has some level of consciousness sees the shit going on, right? We don't really need to talk about that. There's a smaller amount of people that know the actual solutions. And there's a smaller amount of people within that group that feel like they have access to it or that they could achieve it or that they could do it or that they could step into it. Right. So if we can just make that accessible, right? That's what we're doing here. And by Jim's, again, I don't even know if I got back to the second thing when I said the two things I got when I walked on Galt's.
Okay.
You still with me?
Yeah, I hear
Okay,
you.
cool. My battery popped up. One was, this is how we need to grow food, and two, we need to make this more accessible to people. Hands down, day one, that's what I saw, right? So we needed to develop more communities. And when I started sharing that with Jim, what I noticed is like the visions that were coming through us, is the way that I say it, was they were running parallel, and they feed each other, and they crisscross, right? And they interconnect, and the roots cross, and they root each other. But really what I've picked up most is like, if we can build these, I'm going to say it figuratively, creatively, and then I'll say what it actually is. If we can plant these seeds around the country and around the world, these seeds can then spread into the communities and literally feed the communities, right? So we have a concept that we refer to as a Freedom Farm Academy, and we can call it an education and demonstration site for freedom. We can call it a resource center. We could call it a nursery. We could call it a community center. We could call it a sustainable community, an eco village. You can call it all these terms, right? Like whatever you want to call it. At the end of the day, it's a place and a space that can provide for the local community. Yes. Actual resources, right? In the form of food, in the form of energy, in the form of a place to come, in the form of healing, in the form of learning and education. And again, these aren't even new. People have been doing these. They're looking around going, wow, everybody's starting to come around now, right? So this isn't even anything new. It's just starting to spread right now. And people are getting it. So I think the conversation, because none of this works unless somebody gets in the land. The biggest thing I can tell somebody is get the hell off the computer, this screen they're watching with us, and go to a food forest and go to a garden and go to a farm, right? But the intellectual and logical side of it is just understanding that where we're at in time and what needs to be done. And then the point is to go and actually execute it. So getting back into that business model by building these seeds and these hubs all over the place, the community that I'm putting together right now that I just sent you yesterday or this morning was that is a branch, that is a propagation, that is a germination of Galt's, right? Like I'm 20 minutes down the road. Where do you think I'm going to get a lot of the resources to grow it? From Galt's, right? Where do you think I can get the people? From Galt's. Where do you think we can get the knowledge and the skills? From Galt's, right? So now we have this actual site that has become, let alone just the thoughts and the ideas and the relationship that I've had with Jim and everybody that's come through there, right? Jim is just one model of it, right? He's embodying it, right? So now that I've had that experience can be brought to another land, and it starts to spread. And now we start to do these all over the place. And that's a business model. So if somebody either has land right now or wants to invest their, what we call financial capital, into something to generate a resource that can be abundantly available to people, we have that, and we're living it. Like right now, like you can come to Galt's and you can see it, and you've seen it, right? So there's an opportunity for somebody that no matter where you say anything you want, but if your financial resources are in the economy, you're at the mercy of the economy, right? Like whether interest rates go up, whether they go down, whether the value of the dollar inflates or deflates, or another world power comes up, or a new industry comes in, or crypto comes in, or real estate goes, whatever it is, you're at the mercy of it. And everybody's just trying to catch the right wave, right? So like, if you want to play that game, play the game, just play it intentionally and just know that that's what you're playing. Right. But everybody has foundational needs. Right. And if we can take this resources, time, money, and all this stuff and invest it into the land and actually generate the resources, the actual resources, then people will have the things that they need. And then they can choose to go play the game instead of children being birthed into a world where they don't have a choice, where they have to get a job and they have to do this. Work is good. We all know that. Trust me, this is work. But what I'm saying is they're forced into an environment where they have to work and they have to produce. But what if it was doing something fun in this and they had the access to the resources? Now we're not moving out of scarcity and anxiety, the unhealthy anxiety. Now we're moving out of like, cool, I can be creative. What do I want to provide the world? What do I want to build more of? Right. And is this a utopia concept? Absolutely. I think cities will never go away. I think that our race is probably splitting. Humans are probably splitting into two different races. Right. And it's no longer cultures. It's whatever you want to call it, technology and all that type of stuff. But now is the time, and it's going to take the people who have the courage to do it and stand for it. Probably on one end that feels early, but on the other hand is perfect fucking timing because you see it.
Right. Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned the other OG permaculture people, from 20, 30, 40 years ago who are like, this is going to be the future. And I kind of just realized and discovered that permaculture itself is a kind of a new concept, maybe
Hmm.
just 30 or 40 years old.
Yep.
We
Yep.
mentioned Bill Mollison. Feel free to mention any other champions of the past who are like, there's a new way to do stuff. And, part of my awakening has been the school system and understanding what the
Hmm.
schools were originally designed for, as John Taylor Gatto taught me. And then I connected with the food stuff recently because of my failures with the garden, like, okay, this worked, this didn't work, and I said, I wish I would have learned this as a kid. And then I realized the reason they didn't teach me to do this as a kid is because then I wouldn't need to go buy all their different foods
Yeah.
and all that stuff, and I wouldn't buy their Pepsis and Cokes and all these things. I would have fresh juice. I would have the, who knows, maybe the goat milk, or I don't even know all these things, but
Yeah. Right.
fresh food that's produced on my land within my neighborhood, and
Hmm.
their food business goes entirely to shit. So it's like, oh, so I start to see all the dots connecting,
Hmm.
and I agree with you. There is a bifurcation of humanity, and I think it's going to be the totally free and like healthy people, and God bless the technocracy of the people in the urban cities that didn't do the research, they didn't get God's grace or something, and they're just like trapped in some kind of CBD system or something. So,
Yeah.
for the children, I have a funny story. I was down at in Texas at this farm called Plum Fabulous Farm, I believe it was.
Cool.
Anyways, this lady has, I don't know if I would call it permaculture, but it was like a 1/10 of an acre, a pretty small plot of land, but she's been doing it for 15 years. She's been keeping copious notes,
Mm.
and she says I can. She said this plot provides for, I want to say, like 30 or 40 people, but she has a family of six, so she's able to go sell the surplus at the farmers market. And she said, if I just increased it a little bit, I could provide for like 300 people,
Mm.
because she figured out the math and the inputs and the outputs. And she's like an amazing like scientist, and she's a homeschool mother. Anyway, she had
Cool.
a few kids, and I think it was the 10 or 11-year-old boy who was, he picked up a little seed selling business. So he would
Hmm.
harvest the seeds from the fruits and put them in the bags. And so we're out there, and I must have spent $7 with them or $10, and we
Yeah.
get little food, these little seeds in the bags. And so I do homeschool coaching. So I said, tell me about what you got here. So I pulled up the video, and he starts, well, this is what we have. And young entrepreneur, like, because he was raised in this environment,
Yep.
he's selling the seeds, he's promoting the seeds, and he's learning the basics of presenting and marketing and labeling, and his
Right.
sister's there supportive of him. And I'm just like, what a glorious childhood to be around.
Isn't he just adding value to everybody around him? Like, isn't that like the premise of it? Because it is
Yes,
entrepreneurship, but isn't it just being of value to people?
yes,
Like, isn't that at
absolutely.
the core of it? And isn't that all we really need to teach the kids? Is like, hey, be creative, have fun, do what you want to do, but like, just be of value to people, be of service, right? Like,
100%.
if think about if that's all we taught kids, and
Yep.
obviously keep them safe and whatnot, but
Right.
help them learn, this avatar experience. But I love it, dude. This ties in perfectly with the school system. And again, it's that space of like, you get kids in the land and just look at them play, dude. If anything, they're teaching us, you know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? How to be present, how to be graceful, how to care for things. And they do, you know what I
Yep.
mean? They only learn the other habits from somebody else, labor behaviors learned, right? But there's certain things that are innate. And I think that when you get kids in the land, they just start doing it. They
Mm-hmm.
start building things. They start putting things on top of each other, and they start noticing how they respond. And then they want to get out to it every day and see how it's doing. Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, it's a cool thing. Kids are teaching us, in my opinion.
I agree. I think kids are connected to source directly. And I remember being a young kid and kind of feeling that, like it's like enthusiasm, right? That's the spirit, and
Yeah.
infused, or with the embodiment of the spirit, is like every day's an adventure, every day's exciting. And so that's been part of
Yeah.
my growth too, is getting back to the childlike mind versus the, being seventh or 7, 8 years old in school, and especially as boys, right? Like we got to sit down. It's like we want to go jump and play and climb and scrape ourselves and then go do it again. And so there's this resilience that the child has in the young man and the young woman. And
Hmm.
so for mothers and fathers and people out there, like, 10, 11, 12, 13-year-olds, these young people are able to contribute. And, don't treat them like a baby. They're not a baby anymore.
Yep.
This is the concept that John Gadd talks about, extended adolescence or extended
Mm.
childhood, where back in the day, I mean, this happened to my grandfather when he was 8 years old. One day, his father said, "Hey, today you're going to help me plow the field. You're going to go behind, literally behind like the
Yeah.
oxen and plow that." And my grandfather tells this story, and you can just see like it went literally from childhood to adulthood in like one moment. And he was kind of bitter
Mm-hmm.
about it because it was kind of during the Great Depression, and there was some difficult stuff, and the spiritual development wasn't fully there. But like um 18, 22, 25, 30, like this is adulthood, and we got to be honest with what's going on in the world and say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, here's the responsibility, and you want to contribute to the family, and maybe you want to have your
Mm-hmm.
own family, and here's a very exciting way to go about it, is building this food forest. And you mentioned Freedom Farm Academy. Maybe you can share about that, because I've seen, actually Matthew sent me some of the material, and I saw it. It's like,
Cool.
oh dude, this is a big opportunity for someone who wants to invest, 7 figures or six figures. Like, there's a big opportunity here, because the vision is, and you can correct me because you've been in it for a while, but like to go to this demonstration site, see the composting going on, see the beehives, see
Mm-hmm.
the watering system, see it all going on together, and then be inspired like you did, and now take it to 20 miles south there,
Yep.
and you're doing it yourself. So what would be maybe a message for investors out there, because you're so on point? Whatever the dollar does, okay, and eventually all fiat currencies go to their real worth, which is zero.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so eventually it's going down, and
Yep.
you know, maybe in the next few years, or maybe in our lifetime, whatever it is. But you can't eat money, and this is where the real
You
value is
can't.
of food. So maybe share what what you would talk with, because you're doing big projects, and you feel free to share any of the numbers. But I'm like, I was really impressed. Like, these are big numbers. This is not a small business. For people that have some capital that's either liquid, or that's not performing, or they feel unsafe having it in the stock market right now. What would
Yep.
you say to people that are like, hey, I want to do this, but I'm not quite sure, how to, or what the thought process, because food is more valuable than money.
Preach. You can't build with money either. But I mean, I think you're hitting the nail on the head. Is I think a lot of the anxiety that people feel is just being pulled around by the market. If your money's in the market, you're going to be you're at the yank of the market, right? Like we've all been there. And you're right, man. It's what we're building down here at the other 14 acres is just an extension of a value add to the community, right? So how the way, and they're all little variations of it, right? So I think there's about 17 or 18 right now. Globally, there's Taiwan, and these are Freedom Farm Academies for those listening. In Taiwan, Canada, Texas, there's Galt's Landing again, which is the mecca right now. And the one that's just been it's the furthest along, it's the most mature.
Yeah.
God, I'm not remembering right now, but Ghana, if I didn't say that one, there's one there. So these are being built, right? And these are
Yeah.
actual sites for people to go to. And the industry is agro-tourism, right? Because again, people are interested in it, and there's always going to be people that are just interested in it but don't want to be in it. And that's fine. You know what I mean? It's entertainment to them. And that type of entertainment, I feel good, right? Because you're offering like a healthy space for them to come in and have that experience. But these hubs, how I'm presenting it is, if we can, what I say about Galt's, I'm gonna digress a second here. What I say about Galt's is doing exactly what it was designed to do, which was to educate and demonstrate and to show it, right? So people can come through and they see it and they experience it. We had the big 11/11 event. We have the Airbnb. So I always tell people when they come in and they stay on that Airbnb. Now, granted, the fruit trees are young, like I said, right? We have to allow them to mature. But when they live on that land, everything that they need to sustain their own life while they're there is provided by the land. So there is the solar panels, there is the well that's in the ground, there is the water catchment that's over here in a tank, there is the food, there is the chickens and the pond for fishing in the lake, right? There's everything that somebody needs to sustain their life, right? So it's doing that model. What I said is I wanted to make it more available to where more people could live in it, right? So it's a slight variation, but it's the same thing. Because now when we can go into a property, which we are raising about $2 to $2.5 million right now for this current project. So anybody that is interested, now is the time. Like we're early in it, and that's being completely black and white. We are, my bad, my battery's popping up here. Coming in there, acquiring land, developing it in a way that showcases the environment that people will live in. And once it's all rezoned and coded like that, people will have their own lots. You're not just living in a little, cottage in it. Like we're actually creating lots for everything. You can actually own that lot in this community. And now you're living in, I'm just calling it a food forest community because there's so many different names, right? So who cares what the name is? I'm calling it whatever makes sense to me, right?
Yeah.
But when you're living in this environment, you have access to all of those resources. So now from a financial perspective, you've invested into an opportunity, you've developed it, and you increase the value in it, not just in the short term for somebody to buy into it, but what if somebody could buy into a community that they knew that they were going to continue getting an ROI regardless of what they did because they lived in a place that generated food and it captured water and it was chemical free. And now you start having the compost from the chickens. Maybe you do have the cows, right? You can sell those products. You can craft those products. You can create medicine. You can create tinctures. You can create teas. You can sell seeds. You can sell the fruit. You can sell the seeds of the fruit. You can grow your own food and sell your own trees. You can propagate your own plants. You can have a cafe on site, right? So these are all value. You can rent out the Airbnbs. You can do farm tours, right? On bigger lots, maybe not one that's this big, right? So you have all these examples. We're doing fishing tours down at Galt's, right? Where somebody can go do a fishing tour. That's like 700, 800 bucks at some places, right?
Awesome.
Like we're doing it at like half that, and you can come in and catch the fish and hang with whether it's me or Jim or whoever's doing it, on that day and have a great conversation and you get the fish and then you can go to the outdoor patio, which is right in front of the Airbnbs and cook it. And you made yourself a meal right there. Right. Yeah. So we're not just talking about it. This isn't a concept and an idea. We're living it. And there's genuine value that people are interacting with, is how I'm going to say it, that's uplifting and encouraging their lives, right? So that is what we're doing down there. So again, what if somebody moved in there and they had access to all the resources that they need, but what if they were also part of a profit share? So the exact opposite, everybody knows what an HOA is. I have to pay into this thing and they run it the way they want to. What if you could pay into this thing and you had a team of people that actually helped to harness the food and you were delivered a box of food at your door maybe every couple of days or every week because some of the people on the land, your payment into them was contributing their work so that they could give you the food that's on your own land. By the way, you can go pick your own fruit whenever you want it, but you also can be a part of this thing. So now you have a built-in CSA on the land that you live in. And another example is I had a buddy of mine that he wanted 2 acres here in Florida. And I said, dude, would you live on a smaller lot if you knew you lived in a community that had access to all the resources that you wanted? And he said, absolutely. You know what I mean? So like this big lot and everything that they need, it's because people feel like they need the space to build what they want so they can access what they feel like they either want or need. Right. Yeah. So if we can just build that into the way that we live, we don't need to be bumping people so far. You know what I mean? Like I think a lot of people are buying the homestead dream. I don't think people know what they're getting into. And trust me, there are people who will always love it and want it. And absolutely. And it makes more sense for livestock and wildlife and stuff like that. So I'm not knocking it. What I'm saying is I think a lot of people are just buying it because it's the first thing that they can find, right? It's like, okay, where do I turn? I need to build a homestead. Yeah. That's a daunting task to do that on your own. So what if you can live in a community where you have people that are supporting it and helping it and you're part of the profit share, right? And you know that the system is self-sustaining. So it's not a high input system. Right now, you start sharing those profits. Now you're making a financial ROI just because you live in the neighborhood,
right?
And you're getting fed, right? Like think about that concept for a second. What if you could buy into a neighborhood where you were actually growing all your own food? So now your expenses are going down, but you're getting a financial ROI because the space that you live in is so valuable to the people around you that they're willing to give you money in exchange for what you're generating on the land.
Amazing.
That's the model that's right in front of us right now. And you can do that in your own property. Do a small business. You could do it with a couple small houses in the same neighborhood, or you can get a piece of land and do it. And we're actually doing it right now, and we're modeling it, and you can see this and you can walk through it and you can see it and taste it and touch it and feel it and all of it. It's real.
That's right. Yeah, I love this vision because I think this is where humanity is going, and really you and Jim and some of the other people out there that I mentioned really are visionaries, Cameron. So I just want to acknowledge you because it's like there's work involved, and that's where I think it's really good for that we're honest with ourselves. It's like, oh yeah, you got to put your boots on, and if it's raining, go do work, but you can't. What's the quote? Is the 2 best times to plant a tree is 20 years ago and today.
Yep.
It's like, oh, I mean, I got to start today. Well, this is the truth, like what if you would have planted it 20 years ago? And it's like an exponential increase of fruit production as far as I'm aware of. And you can correct me if I'm mistaken there. But like, you plant, let's say fruit trees that are 2 to 3 years old, and they start producing around 4 to 6 years, or 4 to 7, or what's the general time frame? I mean, ballpark roughly for like planting
Yeah,
fruit that they produce.
I always tell people money speeds up time, right? So you can buy bigger trees, you can buy taller trees, you can buy more mature trees. You know what I mean? Buying a 30-gallon mango is different than a 3 gallon. You know what
Yeah,
I mean? But if you're in it for the long haul and you're shorter on funds, that's okay. You know what I
yeah,
mean? So there's so many different ways to do it. There's no black and white example. For a medium sized tree, we always tell people your greens, your leafy greens, your perennials, meaning they come back every year, you can be eating in a couple of months. Your tubers such as potatoes and cassava here, and plantains and papayas and gingers and turmerics. Those are what we call short cycled foods. So you can be eating in 9 to 12 months, give or take, right? We always say the fruit trees are anywhere from 18 months to 2 years. You know what I mean? And like last year, I think I got like 12 peaches and like 8 mangoes. You know what I mean? So it's not a ton to live off of, but what's the next year going to be, right? And
right,
again, like I said, I planted the tree and I ate from it. I haven't done anything since, dude. So
right,
whatever comes this year was just on top of it,
right.
right? So yeah, that's kind of how we share it with people though, as far as the time frame of what you can produce. And again, every region's different, but the concepts don't change. It's building a natural system that works together.
Yeah. Well, that is glorious, Cameron. Here, I think we'll wrap up. Respect your time. I'm sure you got important work to do, and if you have any final, words of advice here, but just for the people, you can see where this is going, and you can feel the commitment that Cameron has, and we thank you for that, Cameron, and from Jim as well, and some of the other people who
Mm-hmm.
you'll see doing these conversations. It's like this is a whole different ball game of food and independence, and because like the freedom community, which I appreciate you brought up, it's like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we can get the concepts, but like now it's time for implementation, which is putting something into the ground and changing myself and changing what I'm doing, because
Mm-hmm.
we can complain about all those dudes out there, those bad actors, but how am I contributing to solutions? How am I building the world that I want to see? And it's a different conversation than, hey, let's get this guy in office, or whatever. It's like, no, those guys are going to do what they're going to do. They're committed to their path. And people like us and you and Jim, these people are like, we're committed to the right path. We been blessed to see something happen, and we're like, that seems to be the right way. And as Martin Luther King said, it's always the right time to do the right thing. And this is what's coming up, is like, oh, you know what, I don't agree with this stuff, so I need to stop contributing over here, put my energy, put my real voting over here, which in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion is my purchases, my energy, my
Yep.
attention, my
Yep.
effort, my relationships. And I've stopped trying to save the world as I wanted to in the past. It's like, let's just build a community. Let's just find some trusting, good, moral humans to work with. And from there, maybe we will change the world. I know Jim is, and I know you are, in your way there. And we mentioned, well, we mentioned food forest abundance. Can you help me distinguish between food forest everywhere and food forest abundance, if you can? And
Absolutely.
then we'll let you cut loose for the
For
conversation.
sure, for sure. So again, Food Forest Abundance is a global cooperative inspiring people to grow food instead of lawns. And our product is designed, which again is one of the best places, if not the best place for people to start, is get a blueprint to put out in front of you so you know your next steps,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you can get a free strategy session on the website. Food Forest Everywhere is my company with a couple of partners, and we are a cooperative partner, meaning we are working together with Food Forest Abundance. And the piece that we uh, offer is installation. So
Yeah.
we actually take those designs that come from FFA, but again, because that's a global cooperative, we're here in Florida. We do travel a little bit. We've been in Georgia and whatnot, but we help people actually put it in the ground. So there's some DIYers that are like, hey, just give me the design, I'll do it, or I'll build it with my community.
Yep.
And then there's other people that's like, hey, dude, I got the money to invest right now because I see the long-term vision. I would love to pay you guys to do it. And then we go in and we are a full service. We bring in all the materials. We rip out everything that's not needed, in i.e. the sod, and we bring in everything that's needed to build a food forest. So we're not landscaping. I've been saying we're forestscaping a property, right? And the last piece I'll throw in there is Galt's Landing, again, is an extension of FFA, and it's the actual demonstration site, education and demonstration site that we refer to as a Freedom Farm Academy. And again, that is a concept that we can actually showcase to people on how somebody can invest into one today on their own property, or purchase a property and do it, really, on any scale, to be honest with you, because the bigger the scale, the more people you can bring in. So, again, that's what we're doing. We're building a I hope that distinguishes
Yeah.
all of that.
That's beautiful, man. Yeah. So the design and the install, this seems to be the 1-2 of the future. And I recommend anybody with interest go visit Galt's Landing. I think they'll probably do another event 11/11, and hope forward to
Yep.
to see you again. And it's just gonna keep growing. I mean, seeing the I actually got to go on the boat that one time out there, and
Yeah.
it's just like, dude, you're able to catch fish, take it inside. Like this is amazing, and it takes the design and the attention. It's like it's literally, as the gym says, it's like heaven on earth, or no, it's just Garden of Eden, you know,
Yeah. Why
recreated.
not?
Yeah, it's just
Why
so
not?
glorious to see, man. And so thank you for your leadership. And what
Absolutely.
advice would you have, just in closing here, for somebody who either wants a garden or a food forest, or they want to do a Freedom Farm Academy, and they're hesitant, or they have some programming, because you had to overcome a lot, I feel, to get where you are right now. But you're doing it right. You're like, I would say, living the dream. I would say you're living on purpose and doing something really important, as Jim is and these other people. And we want more people like this. So even just advice for people that see the goodness of it, but whatever hesitation they have, they just need a little bit of insight from somebody about the joy or the progress or success that you have experienced so far.
Absolutely. I'll give you a front end and a back end. And on the front end is reach out to somebody with FFA. You can do the strategy session. You can get a hold of me. You can get a hold of Jim. If you want to put my number somewhere in the details of this, like I'm great with all of that, right? So on the front end is get design, get help, get consulting, right? On the back end, get together with a community of people, band your resources together, and let's build.
Yeah, beautiful. So simple. That's what we're doing here, is taking the complicated matters and questions of life to make it simple. So many great quotes you had. One is this is about supporting life. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
the great thing, supporting each other, the children, the women, the elderly, the men, and building something that will actually have an impact on the next
Mm-hmm.
generation, and inspire other people, and provide food, and really create this beautiful landscape and food forest. So thank you, Cameron, for joining me. Thank you, listener, for participating in this conversation, and for joining me on Voluntary Living, where we are building a world based on consent, self-ownership, and freedom, and spreading all this goodness, planting the seeds out there so that we can win and thrive through this great awakening that I call the great self-ownership awakening that's here now. And it's such a
Yeah.
glorious and beautiful time to be alive. Thank you for all the people that contribute out there. And we'll see you next time on Voluntary Living. Peace and love, everybody. And grow
Thanks,
freedom.
brother. Love you, dude.